Good evening, everyone. I'm Attorney Daryl Jones. I'm the board chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, and we are so glad and honored that you have joined us this evening for this TELE-TOWN hall on our freedoms, our vote. We are celebrating democracy. We're celebrating the resiliency of members of Congress that stood up, the law enforcement that stood up to the rioters at the Capitol to stand in favor of liberty, to stand in favor of protecting our right to vote. Because what was that issue on January 6th? At the very core of it was the vote of the American people that was being challenged. They were trying to stop the certification, stop the will of the vote of the people of this country. That's what this was all about. And so this evening, we're so proud to be able to join hands and join in a conversation to talk about the challenges that we're facing, how to overcome those challenges, and what January 6th means to all of us. We're really pleased to have with us this evening a very diverse panel that will be with us. We're diverse in all manners. And let me tell you, if you think you're going to get the folks that were just really entrenched and has been really involved in these movements, you're going to get that. But I'll tell you what else you're going to get. You're going to get the perspective of the Gen Zs. You're going to get the perspective of the National Organization for Women. You're going to get perspectives now that you may not have gotten anywhere else, because that's what this is all about, is being certain that each of our constituencies is represented. And what was being threatened on January 6th was exactly that, was the will of the people with regards to the issues that were of concern to the people, because that's what they were voting were their issues. So the certification was the certification of the issues of the people of our country that was a major concern with them. I'm really pleased to bring up first, because I know that they have him all over the House these days. I think they're probably on vote number 21 or 22 or somewhere up there, if not 40 by now. But Congressman John Sarbanes, who's out of the District 3 of the state of Maryland, he is just an outstanding congressman. I can tell you that he's been on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He's on the House Oversight and Reform Committee. He is one of the most brilliant Congress people that you will come across. He has studied, he has researched, and he's learned it. He doesn't take a position without knowing the facts behind that position. He is the epitome of what you want in a statesman and a congressman. And I'm not saying that because he's my congressman, although he is. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Congressman John Sarbanes.
Thank you very much, Daryl, for that very, very kind introduction. And thank you and everybody who's part of this call, the broad coalition. Barbara, it's great to see you again.
Great to see you.
We've all been part of this for a long time, and we're not going to let go of it. But I appreciate your teeing this up. This is an important day, National Day of Action. I've been participating in other events today around it. Let me give you a quick update on the state of play here on Capitol Hill. At 10 p.m. tonight, we're going back into session. We're adjourned right now. We're going to go back in. They're going to take another run at the roll call to try to elect a speaker. They're flying a couple people who were out of town in. That's why we got to wait till 10 o'clock to try to get their numbers. But regardless of where things end tonight, and if ultimately a speaker is elected, the display over the last few days has been shameful, because you've had a small group of extreme lawmakers who have basically taken the House of Representatives hostage, demanding all manner of things, which were not good for the institution. And when you go after the institution that way, when you disrespect the institution, which is the instrument of the American people, you're fundamentally disrespecting the people. Now, today is a sober day, as we all know. We're marking 2 years since the attack on the citadel of American democracy, the U.S. Capitol. We remember first and foremost the officers who gave their lives that day, seeking to protect us and protect democracy. We owe them a great debt of gratitude, and the many others who protected us that day and allowed us, you may remember, after we got things back under control, to finish what we started that day, which was to certify the electoral results and give confidence to the American people that we could achieve a transfer of power Sadly, it was not a peaceful transfer of power, which is what we've come to expect in this country. But that's part of why we're here tonight, because we want to fortify our democracy going forward and make sure that these kinds of things don't happen again. As Daryl alluded to up front, when he talked about the diversity of participants in the call this evening, democracy is everybody's business. It doesn't matter what community you're from. It doesn't matter what age you are, what your walk of life is. If you're in this country, democracy has to be your business. And the 2022 midterms, I think, sent a powerful message from the voters that democracy was on the ballot. A lot of the pundits and the polls did not pick up on this sufficiently, but the exit polling indicated that people were anxious about the state of our democracy. Many of them were aghast at the election deniers across the country that were seeking to hold offices, high offices within their state, Secretary of State offices, governor's offices, and others, and yet they were denying the results of the 2020 election, incredibly. They were sent packing largely, which I was glad to see, and suggests that Americans were paying more attention to the state of their democracy than many people gave them credit for. And as a result of that, we were able to kind of pull our democracy back from the brink. But we all know, and certainly people on this call and who are participating understand, that just because we pulled it back from the brink doesn't mean it isn't still fragile and needs a lot of nurturing and attention and support if we're going to fortify it going forward. And that's really what this day of action is all about. There has to be accountability for those who've been trying to undermine our democracy.
Yes.
Certainly, we would like to see the U.S. Justice Department go as far as it can in prosecuting those who were responsible for this, including the former president, because there seems to be sufficient evidence pointing in his direction. But anybody else who were seeking to undermine the very fabric of our democracy. But beyond that, going forward, we all need to play a role, whether it's at the local, state, or national level, to do what we can, as I say, to strengthen the connective tissue of our democracy. And that means picking up in many ways where we left off not too long ago. The For the People Act, which was H.R. 1 at the national level, would address gerrymandering. It would address the influence of big money in our politics, dark money. It would create fair access to the ballot box all across this country. It would address ethics and accountability, as we know is so important. It would bring to the fore the issue of DC statehood, which is so near and dear to many and that we have worked for. The For the People Act then became the Freedom to Vote Act. The Freedom to Vote Act then became the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act. But every iteration of this was a package of robust reforms that can transform our democracy and make sure that it is lasting for the ages. And tonight we reaffirm our commitment to do whatever each of us can in whatever circle of influence we may have, whatever peer group we may occupy. We have to spread the word and build the movement and the power behind this continuing effort to make a difference. So thank you for your voice. Thank you for this day of action, our freedoms, our vote. That's what this is all about. We're going to continue to do what we can here on Capitol Hill, even with a Republican House of Representatives. We're going to go to them and we're going to say, do you want to join with us in standing up for our democracy? And if some will reach out and be part of that, we embrace them. If they want to lean against it and team up with some of these efforts at mischief in the states around the country, we're going to highlight that and expose it and continue to work as hard as we can to make sure we do the right thing. So Daryl, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm going to have to jump because I got a few things to do off campus before I get back here at 10 o'clock. We'll see how late things go tonight. But somebody asked me yesterday to introduce myself on a call, and I said, well, what I do for a living these days is I get up every day, I drive to Washington, I stand up every 90 minutes and yell out the name Hakeem Jeffries. And then I go home and I get back up and I come back the next day and do it all over again. And I've called out his name 13 times and I'll keep calling it out as long as I can. And by the way, one day Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and that will be a great day for our country. Back to you, Daryl and Barbara and everybody else. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congressman. We always appreciate you, appreciate all that you do. And let me tell you before you go that we appreciate the strength and the showing of the strength of all those members in Congress that on January 6th decided they would not leave, they would not buckle, they would not falter. They stayed in there and got the certification done. We appreciate that, and I want to be certain that you recognize and know how much we appreciate the strength and character that all the members of Congress that went through that performed and showed the country what backbone is all about and what democracy really means. So we want to be certain that you know that, Congressman.
Thanks very much, Daryl. All the best. Take care.
Take care. We're really pleased to have with us, and I want to bring for some opening remarks the lady who probably needs no real introduction. Most of the country knows her. They call her the Queen Mother of Election Protection. They call her the person that Congress calls on when they have a question about voting rights and what to do. State senators call on her to ask, what's the best way to be certain that everyone is able to participate in the system. Get called down to the state of Georgia to monitor the election that's there, be certain that people make it to the polls. It's my pleasure to bring up for some opening remarks the president and founder of the Transformative Justice Coalition, the president emeritus of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, ladies and gentlemen, attorney, Dr. Barbara Arnwine. Barbara.
All right. Well, first of all, Daryl, thank you. And Congressman Sarbanes was awesome, as he always is. There's a lot of people who call themselves leaders, but he's a true leader. And I am so delighted that as busy as they are on that House floor, let me be clear, they're not on the floor, but they are in back rooms meeting like crazy right now. And it's not just the Dems, not just the Republican Party, it's the Democrats also. They're having serious conversations about how to deal with these realities, these political realities existing in the House. But before I get into all of that, let me say good evening, everyone. What a blessing it is to be able to address you today. And I want to say a special shout out, Daryl, to the watch parties that are happening around the country. I want to say, a real big shout out to, Expo and Madison, Wisconsin. They just wrote and said, we own. And I said, all right now. We got a call earlier before we even started from the mighty, Celebrating Sisterhood and so many other groups out of Philadelphia. They're having a watch party and they are more than ready. We have had a wonderful, in fact, they were on it for a minute here from the Brunswick, Georgia. We have a watch party going on there. And the mighty Kim Arbery, Ahmaud Arbery's auntie, has put that together, and with the help of a wonderful local church, and they're having a party going on. We also want to give out, and I'm going to let Daryl do this one, but I'm going to turn it over to you, Daryl, to do the last one. But I want to talk also about the Gen Z Network. All right now, because we have this whole process as the Transformative Justice Coalition of undertaking these democracy advocacy trainings for Gen Z and millennials. And we have been doing these now since 2017. And we have literally had, hundreds, people come through them. And our most recent class, oh, Daryl, we got two involved because we've been taking them on the road. And they've been to everywhere. They've gone all the way on the road to Milwaukee. They've been to Georgia. And we're about to go to Houston. We're about to do New Orleans. We are on the road with our Gen Zers because our whole thing, always when you talk to the Transformative Justice Coalition, our focus is building permanent, independent, people-owned and organized, what we call democracy, voting rights infrastructure. Nothing short of that will ever do in a country that calls itself a democracy. You can't leave it to just political parties. You can't just leave it to candidates. You can't just leave it to donors. You got to have a ability of the people to run and to determine what the government should look like. How do they get representative? People love to tell you, oh, it's a Republican, system of representatives. Yes, but who determines that? The people do, as their democratic right. And so we want to make sure that as we talk about it. So I wanted to talk about those great watch parties and ending on that Gen Z one. But Daryl, you got to bring up the one more. There's one more I didn't talk about.
Well, Barbara, there's one more. And, they always say you save the best for last. Right. And I'm sure that's what you were doing there. Because, Congressman Sarbanes' district in Annapolis, Maryland is having a watch party, unlike any watch party. I know they're having their dinner, they're having their speakers, they are getting it on. They're showing you how to do it Maryland style. And I'm telling you, they're going all out for it. They go all out for it every time they get involved, whether they're coming to the March on Washington with us, or if they're coming down to Brunswick with us to protest. They always do it. And I'm so proud of our Annapolis folks and their involvement with TJC and all of the action movement that they do, Barbara. Absolutely. And I'm going back to you.
And yes, and I want to thank also the hundreds. Whoa! They said there were so many of them. They decided not to try to come together and do one watch party, but they got all these things going on in Chicago. Hundreds of them are watching. And we are so grateful to, all the groups there that have come together and have really promoted tonight's event. We also want to thank, of course, DC. DC's never going to be left out. And all the people down in Roanoke, Virginia, and around the country who are also involved. And I want to give a shout out to all of you who registered via Eventbrite, from all over the country. Again, thanks. Our North Carolina folks, everybody who is participating. And I want to say, if you want to next time host a watch party, you know who to talk to, because we will continue to build, as we said, our goal is permanent voting rights, democracy infrastructure. So moving on, we're commemorating what's called a historic moment. It's a moment in history that should never be forgotten. And it's a moment in history, the lessons from which should be everlasting to the American democracy. Motivated by the big lie, by Trump's big lie, the lie of a president as he's going out of office. Thousands of people stormed our Capitol. People were killed. People were maimed. People were psychologically traumatized. We watched people prance around with the Confederate flag in the Capitol as white supremacy was uplifted. Every threat that we've ever worried about as activists of trying to expand our democracy, we saw these folks who want to actually limit and destroy our democracy. And we're talking about democracy that has never fully reached its potential. A democracy where we still don't have, great representation for women, where we still don't have the numbers of young people represented across the board. We're talking about, a democracy that has so many faults and fault lines to still be overcome to be a truly representative democracy. Yet there are people who the only thing they think about is white political domination. But it's worse than that, right? We know that you'll hear from Kristen about how it's patriarchal also. You'll hear from many of us about how it is elitist to the core. It does not care for people who are poor. You'll hear about us, about all of these issues that when we talk about democracy, we're not just talking status quo, we're talking about a real, robust, inclusive, multiracial democracy. Nothing less will ever do. And so our goal here tonight is not only to talk about the incredible work that has been done by the January 6th committee, their amazing report, all 697 pages of it. Is anybody else got it? I got it. And it is all, I don't know. I've been looking at it saying, oh, how am I going to read all that? But I'm going to try to read as much of it as I can. But interestingly, as my friend Ari Melver has been pointing out, it is now a bestseller. All 3 editions are bestsellers because the people want to know. Everybody said the January 6th committee was going to be a snooze, Daryl. They said folks were just going to ignore it. Boring. Who wants to watch some congressional hearing? It's going to be a big failure. Nobody's going to know a thing about what's going on. And what happened, folks? As usual, they got the American people wrong. And millions. In fact, I saw a survey that said that by their count, 49% of all adults watched some part of the January 6th hearings. So that tells you that there's a thirst in our society that we saw during the midterms for democracy, and people will not stop. So the prospects of going backwards in this day and age, unthinkable and not going to happen, because some of us will never allow such a thing to be a reality. We must move forward. We must have a more just democracy. But the anti-democracy forces, they are serious. And when I've been watching this debate, quote, this fight over the Senate leader, who's going to be the speaker for this new dominant, barely dominant GOP led House, what I've seen is a fight between 2 extremes. 2 extremes. Neither one is what you would call liberal. Neither one is moderate. Neither one is progressive for sure. It is the right versus the hard right. That's what we're watching. And in that reality, they have a lot of unity. They have unity over getting rid of the ethics committee. They have unity over weaponizing, having this entire, committee to try to undermine the DOJ and other federal agencies because they call it the weaponization of the US government. They're going to do this stuff. They're going to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop. They're going to do all this nonsense for the next, year, because, some of us are committed to doing the work that's necessary to make sure the people's voices are always heard. So I want us to understand who we are dealing with. This is not a fight of moderates versus extreme. It's a fight about the hard right versus the right. And neither one of them stands for what the American people need. So as I close, Daryl, because you know me, because I can go on, but we got some great panelists and they can go on. And I want to get to them ASAP, but I want to just remind us that we're here tonight to talk about how we move forward. We know that when we unite, when all the mighty groups come together, when all the mighty people come together, when the folks who get inspired become, the fighters and the advocates, when we unite, nothing can stop us. We're strong. They laugh and they say every time, 2020, they said it's going to be the lowest voter turnout in the history of the United States because you got COVID, you can't stop it. And what happened? We got out there. The groups got out there. The people who care got out there. We had the largest voter turnout, the second largest voter turnout in history. They said, you can't win 2 Georgia Senate runoffs. Not going to happen, especially when you got, Herschel, and you got, these other, candidates, and they were wrong again. We just got to understand that conventional wisdom is not wise, it's not even right, and it's not even conventional because it's not counting all of us. And as long as we work together, we will make the change, Jonah. We'll make the change, Kristen. We'll make the change, Malaj. We'll make the change, Jocelyn. We'll make the change, Omar. We'll make the change that will bring us to another reality. And I want to remind you in ending, Daryl, that 2023 is not an off year. For us, those that voted to democracy, it's a most on year. We must be on it like we've never been before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And you're absolutely right. We do have to be right on top of this democracy. We have to be advancing the issues that are important to us. We cannot, and everybody on this line has heard me say it before, and Barbara almost knows it before I say it, we can't stay on the sidewalk. We've got to get into the street to make things happen. And that's where it happens is in the streets. So we've got to be certain we get into the streets to make things happen. And when we talk about getting into the streets and we're giving some shout outs, we want to be certain that we also recognize all those folks in Milwaukee, because I understand they have another group that's watching us in Milwaukee in addition to the Expo group. So Milwaukee's all over the place, and they're not to be outdone, Jonah. They're not to be outdone because Howard University has its watch party going on, and our own Toussaint Kirk, who's one of our Gen Zers that went through training, he's leading a watch party. It's going on, folks. I'm telling you, everybody's wondering what everybody's doing. Well, you better watch the Gen Zs because that's where it's coming from. They're the ones turning things around. Yeah, I'm gonna let them tell you about it. But Jonah, I want to go to you first for your opening remarks.
Wait a minute. There's one thing we need to address real quickly. I know people are saying, "Where's Maxine Waters?" And I want you to know that we received a call within the hour before we started from her office informing us, regrettably, that she would not be able to join us. They've been calling us all day long, making sure that they were ready, had everything they needed. She clearly was very intent on coming. And in fact, she and I talked. We saw each other and talked and celebrate the fact that we're going to have this event. But sadly, there is, as I mentioned, all these meetings going on to deal with the realities, and the Dems aren't sitting back, their leadership's not sitting back, and she cannot be with us today. And one thing I love about Maxine, we know that if she's not with us, wherever she is, she's doing the work that has to be done. We miss her. We wish she would be here. But the one thing they said was next. They said, please let us know when you have your next event because we want her to come. She wants to be there. She wants to be heard. Okay, Daryl, I had to make sure that we address that up front.
And you're absolutely right, Barbara. And it's not just that she had a meeting. She had a strategy meeting. This is a strategy meeting dealing with the very issue of the selection of the Speaker of the House and all the other things that's going on there. So we want to be certain that everyone I had a complete appreciation for what the Congresswoman was going through. And, started to send Barbara over there to have her go pull her out till they told us that it was a strategy meeting. I said, Barbara, stop, don't go get her. So, we're, certainly want to be certain that we're recognizing that the Congresswoman is just doing phenomenal things.
Much
Jonah,
love.
absolutely. Jonah Minkoff-Zern is with Public Citizen. Folks, if y'all don't know, I'm gonna use my slang, if y'all don't know Jonah, y'all don't know activism, because when you talk about activism, Jonah Minkoff-Zern is one of the people that's at the forefront of it. You may not see him laying out to stop the planes from taking off as part of some type of protest, but you can rest assured that he has a finger in it some kind of way. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jonah Minkoff-Zern. Jonah.
Thank you so much, Darrell. It's such an honor to be here today, and definitely hard to follow Miss Barbara, who's really one of the most inspiring speakers I know. So thank you so much for giving me a minute to say some words. First I just wanted to address what's happening. So voters in battleground states rejected election deniers like Miss Barbara and Representative Sarbanes discussed, and voted to protect our freedoms in the most visible 2022 midterm elections. But grave threats to our democracy and our freedoms continue. MAGA Republicans will use their control of the House of Representatives and the Supreme Court and state governments to do anything to gain power to achieve their extreme agenda and take away our freedoms. And we're seeing that this week with this struggle of who can be most right-wing and ridiculous in the House. And we were talking before the meeting today. What are they bargaining for? They're bargaining for the ability to take away everything we want, to defund all the programs that we care about. That's really what their agenda is. They want to take away our freedoms, whether it's our reproductive rights, whether it's our ability to educate our children, whether it's our ability to access healthcare. They want to take away those rights. They're to gain power and more wealth for an extreme few. Donald Trump and his co-conspirators must be held accountable for their conspiracy to overturn an election that they knew they lost in the violent attack on our country of January 6th. And they must be held accountable for the ongoing actions and attacks on our democracy. And we have to come together like people are doing across the country today to protect our freedoms. So people are watching this event and watch parties around the country right now. Also around the country today, from Denver, Colorado, led by Mi Familia Vota, to Philadelphia with leadership from TJC and Indivisible and Philadelphia Neighborhood Association, the Philadelphia Neighbors, to cities across the country, to DC, where Miss Barbara and I saw the Kings speak, Representative Sarbanes speak, and many of our young leaders talk about the freedoms that are under attack by these MAGA Republicans who are threatening our very lifestyle and our democracy. And we need to understand the threat and what this struggle in the House represents. They are extreme and they want to shut it down, and they are willing to shut it down on every level to undermine our very freedoms, because they want power, because they want control, and because they want to, in many cases, advance their white supremacist agenda. So we need to build a movement for democracy. We need to build a movement for equality. And that's what we're doing today in the streets all around the country. And that's what we need to keep doing. When Martin Luther King III and Andrea Waters King spoke today, they talked about the fact that this is the 60-year anniversary from the March on Washington this year, the 60-year march, the 60-year anniversary. And as Martin Luther King III's father said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And we have to keep marching. We have to keep marching in the footsteps of great people like his father, in the footsteps or marching hand in hand with the great people like Miss Barbara Arnwine and the young people we're going to hear on this call today. It's our movement now, and it's our moment. And the history of our nation is being written right now. We are in a dangerous moment, but we are also in a moment of hope and opportunity, where the demographics of our nation are shifting, where the leadership and the demographics of our nation are shifting. And we can build a multiracial, multi-generational democracy if we show up, not just on election day, but every day in struggle. So I'm so honored to be here today with this amazing group of people and look forward to standing arm in arm with you many times again.
Thank you, Jonah. Thanks so much. And, you know, not only standing arm in arm, folks, but feel free, because if I know Jonah like I think I know Jonah, you know, and I know Jocelyn knows what I'm about to say, feel free to get locked up with us too, you know, because we have no problem, you know, sacrificing our bodies for freedom. And that's what this is about. Whatever the call is that needs to be made to free people to be able to vote and have their voices heard and their freedoms adhered to, we're willing to do it. And that's what this is about. That's what this phenomenal panel is about that we've assembled here today. And, you know, let's introduce our panel that we have here, Barbara. You know, do you want to introduce the first one, Kristen Nunes? Barbara.
Oh my goodness. Kristen Nunes is the amazing leader of the National Organization for Women. She has brought this organization forward. You know, people always talk about, you know, women, you know, women's rights. But she has said, when we say women, we mean all women, all women. We aren't, you know, we don't move without our Latinas. We don't move without the Black women. We don't move without women from, you know, our Asian sisters. We don't move if we're not talking about people in all our gender identity spectrum. We don't move unless we are united for the cause of advancing all women, Native American women, Indigenous women. We got to do it. And I just love her because she's thoughtful. She is, you know, a whole lot of people do one thing I can't stand. As leaders, the only thing they think about is from like the movie Hamilton, I want to be in that room. All they think about is, you know, from the play Hamilton, they just want to be in the room where the difference is being made. But they never think about the fact that other people should be in that room. Other people should be invited. And what she does is lift up all her sisters as she moves and says, hey, give this one, get this one, get them all involved and engaged. If we had more leaders with her vision, if we had more leaders with her commitment and her ideals of real inclusion, not tokenism, but real serious, powerful power leadership across all sectors, all races, all I would say income levels. I mean, she has been an amazing leader. I am so proud of her. She's made sure that voting rights is at the center of the work of the National Organization for Women. And so National Now, all the local affiliates, she has moved us forward. I am so honored. I am so just always happy to introduce my sister, Kristen F. Nunes. Welcome, Kristen.
Barbara, you're gonna make me cry.
No, love you, sis.
But thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And you know that you and Daryl have been family to me since I moved out here from Arizona 3.5 years ago. And you took me under your wing and just have been such a pleasure and a mentor as well. So I just thank you for what you've done as well for just including me and accepting me into this space. So I thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be here with everyone. And Jonah, I read your emails every day. So I do want to, I cannot go to every meeting. If I could, I would. I am just so happy to be in the space. And I remember actually Malaj and Molly, and there, you know, I have to tell you that panel, I mean, your group was so dynamic. I was telling Barbara, these are brilliant, like Gen Z young leaders. I cannot wait to see where they grow, you know, and go. So you all were like challenging us. And I was like, I love this though. But it was great. So it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. And for those I have not met, I hope that we will have opportunity to interact and work in coalition together.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much, Christine. I can tell you that the bench of Gen Zs is long and deep. It's long and deep. You got the tip of it. It's also our pleasure, and I don't want anybody to feel short because Barbara gave this long introduction. I'm not going to do long introductions now. I want to get into the right into the substance of it. It's my pleasure to also introduce to everyone someone that that Barbara was very familiar with, and I am familiar with from the city of Philadelphia. When it comes to election issues, let me tell you, Omar Sabir is the person. You know, and I thought he was limited to just Philadelphia. When we were doing work in Philadelphia, Omar was turning them out. You know, he was out there being certain that people were getting that right to vote on, and they're doing everything necessary. Radio commercials. He was in with the groups, being certain that people were getting that right to vote. I thought he was limited to Philadelphia. We went to Georgia and we're down in Atlanta, and I turn around and who's standing there in the middle of the runoff election? Omar Sabir. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Commissioner Omar Sabir.
Hello. Thank you for having me. And I'd like to thank all the work that you guys are doing. Again, whether it's in Selma, whether it's in Atlanta, whether it's anywhere where voting rights are being questioned, you guys are there on the ground, and I'm glad to partner with you every time. As of right now, I'm in Washington, D.C., and I just left President Biden. He just commemorated January the 6th. What was very interesting about that was that he gave 3 of his 14 medals were to people who were not here. Someone else had to receive their medals. And why is that so important? Because there's 3 people that died on January 6th. And what exactly is January 6th? January 6th was a riot, of course, but it was from a big lie that Barbara had spoken about. But the areas where they were lying about election results were Philadelphia, Wisconsin, Atlanta, Milwaukee, all the areas across our country where Black and brown voters were voting at high turnouts. There was lies. They were saying there was fraud. They were saying there was nefarious activities occurring around elections. And it's very sad. And so we have to know where this whole sort of lying and denial sort of thing is based from. It's based from a high participation of African Americans coming out to vote. And I want everyone to know that African Americans and that vote has power. And it has always had power since the inception of our country. And so I'm encouraging everyone to participate in the election process and to understand that you have the sort of power that's unimaginable to a lot of people, and that African Americans vote will typically decide who's going to be in charge of the country. That's pretty much the way how the numbers are. And now is the time, and our time is now for us to step up for democracy in a huge way, in a huge unprecedented way, because our nation is divided right now. And so there needs to be a sort of group or voice that's going to step up and bring balance to our country. As you can see right now, we can't even get a House Speaker for the House. So there's a lot of unprecedented things that are happening now in our country. And right here, right now, that African-American voice is so important. And that's why so many people sacrificed and died for our right to vote. So we're calling on everyone to step up now. You have marching orders. The number one reason why someone will vote is if you will ask them. So we're calling on the families, the tribe, to reach out to your family and friends and have sincere acts for them to participate in the election process. If you can ask your family and friends 8 times per election cycle, there's a 70% chance that they'll participate in the election process. And what's the ask? That's a text, it's an email, it's a phone call. It's assuring that they're exercising that right to vote. And you have to tell them who to vote for. That's another thing. I can't tell you who to vote for, but you're going to have to let them know, typically, who to vote for, and let their family and friends know who to vote for, and they're going to participate. So we need you to be there. But now's our time. We must do it. It's a historic time in our country, and we're calling on us to stand up for democracy. And they're waiting for us to step up for democracy. And so we can sort of guide the way how America will look. So now's our time. Our time is now. And if there's anything in regards with this sort of work, please count me in, call on me, lean on me, and let's keep on pushing. Let's keep on fighting like a fight. We've had historical turnouts, but I think that we can do better. Now is our time, and our time is now. And again, Dr. King spoke about the fierce urgency of now. And we must do it, and we can do it, and we will do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sabir. And, since you said whenever we need to call on you, we can call on you. Let me tell you, you're in DC. We need you over at the Capitol to straighten out that vote. Get them together so the country can get moving. Okay.
That's crazy. Well, listen, Hakeem Jeffries can be the Speaker of the House. He just needs 6 votes. I mean, we can get it moving that way. We can try that way.
Well, give Clerk Johnson some credit. She's doing a great job with her tellers. They're doing an amazing job, and we all have sympathy for them, and thank God for them.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So our next panelist is not a stranger to TJC whatsoever. It seems like every time we turn around, he's around. I don't know if he's a resident of Texas or a resident of DC. I can tell you that he's truly committed to the cause of voting rights. When Texas was in the middle of their battle, when they were trying to suppress voters in the state of Texas with really just incredible suppressive legislation that they were introducing, the State Senator Ron Reynolds and several other senators took off so that they couldn't have the vote to stop it. They came to DC. I tried to make him a resident of DC at that time because you got that type of commitment, you want to keep him. But he did end up going back to Texas. He's fighting an incredible fight there in the state of Texas, and he's going to really bring some information as we go into this panel discussion a little later on about what's happening on the state level and what state legislators can do in this moment, particularly with regards to how the House of Representatives will be hostile toward voting rights. But ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to introduce the Honorable State Senator from the state of Texas, Ron Reynolds.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much for the distinguished panelists and everyone for participating, and certainly on this solemn day as we reflect on what happened 2 years ago today. I'm very blessed and fortunate to be with some people that are willing to make good trouble. We have to make good trouble. All of us stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank you and Barbara for standing with the Texas representatives that fled our home state to the nation's capital because we were fighting for voting rights. And I encourage everyone that when you see an injustice that is taking place in your community, then you have to stand up. You have to be willing to fight. You have to be willing to make good trouble in the spirit of John Lewis. And so I'm encouraged. I have a lot of resolve, and I'm looking forward to working with people of good mind and of good conscience that are willing to stand and fight for democracy, that are willing to advance the interests of the disenfranchised. There's a scripture that's found in Proverbs 31:8-9. It says, speak out for the one who cannot speak, for the rights of those who are doomed. Speak out, judge fairly, and defend the rights of oppressed and needy people. And I think that is a call to action for all of us. Every one of us has a responsibility to pay it forward for the next generation, to use whatever gifts God gave you to make a difference for others. And I'm empowered by transformative justice. I'm empowered by freedom fighters and liberators. I'm empowered by people that are willing to speak truth to power. I'm empowered by people like Hakeem Jeffries and others who are willing to be on the front line. And it was great seeing you all, what I thought was going to be a day of swearing in in DC. At least we had the ceremonial swearing in from the Congressional Black Caucus. And I'm looking forward to seeing the new chairman, who's my fraternity brother. I'm looking forward to him taking the helm and continuing to see them be the conscience of the conscious. But more importantly, all of us have a stake in the outcome. All of us could do our part. And that is really what I'm here today to say, is that elected officials, yes, we have a role. People, you don't have to have a title to serve. You don't have to have a law degree. You don't have to have any degree. You don't have to have a person of wealth and means. If God gave you a voice, then you can use it. If God gave you feet, then you can use them to walk and knock on doors. If you have a voice, you can make phone calls. If you have social media, then you can use your platform. So all of us can use whatever means that we have to make a difference in our respective communities. And on this day of reflection, that is what I'm choosing to do. And that's why I'm happy that you're having this platform here, so we can have a great dialogue and really engage and enlighten people about the need for all of us to work together. United we stand, divided we fall, and we're all in this together. So I'm excited, and I'm looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you and participating in such a robust discussion.
And thank you so much, Senator. It's always a pleasure to speak with you and to always hear your perspective. It's always just enlightening. You know, we speak of the younger folk that are coming along, the generation and the Gen Zs. Well, now it's Gen Z time. I want to introduce our Gen Zs that are on this panel. The first Gen Z I want to introduce is Jocelyn Garcia. She's the founder of Unpack. And let me tell you, you talk about somebody that's committed to voting rights. She put her body on the line. You know, she was part of a very long, and I don't remember, was it 24 days, Jocelyn? Hunger strike. A hunger strike came to the Capitol, fighting for voting rights, determined to have voting rights with young folks from across the country. And, you know, I can tell you of her commitment because we got arrested together talking about voting rights. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jocelyn Garcia. Jocelyn.
Thank you so much, Daryl and Barbara. Buenos tardes, good evening, everyone here and everyone who is watching. I'm so deeply honored and grateful for your time and your energy and the space that everyone is holding here. Yeah, as Daryl mentioned, it was a 23-day hunger strike, and it was the most difficult thing that I've done and also have led people to do. And it was young people from the ages of 16 through 25 that started this hunger strike in the name of saving our democracy and to pass the Freedom to Vote Act that Congressman John Sarbanes had mentioned earlier, that would expand voting rights and also address the role that money in politics has. And, you know, I look forward to the discussion, but just very quickly, I really appreciate Commissioner Sabir for really grounding the space. And, you know, we are coming together in commemoration for a really awful moment in history, right? But I also really appreciate what Representative Ron Reynolds had just said, that we need to make good trouble, because that is honestly what is necessary for us to consistently do. And a year ago as well, so 2 years ago, we had this awful event takes place. And then a year ago, I was doing the hunger strike and also getting arrested with Daryl while on the hunger strike for voting rights, right? So there's a lot of things to remember at this moment in time. And I remember that a year ago, I had to inform my parents that I was going to get arrested 2 times in a week. And being a young person, you know, they had some thoughts about that. And I remember my mom, she was really ashamed of me. And she said, you know what, I don't want to see you on the news. I don't want to speak to you right now. And I think that what grounds me to do this work and also to participate in tactics like that is I think about the hope and the audacity of hope that our communities, have been having since the beginning of time, right? But also that my own parents had. They are immigrants from Mexico and Guatemala. And for them to come to this country, to believe that a better reality was possible and to sustain that hope over the years is what grounds me to keep going, right? Is what grounds me to stay in this marathon, even when it gets so brutally difficult, even when my own mother, unfortunately, says that she does not want me to participate. And I know that all of that concern comes from a place of love, but also fear from the incidents that we saw 2 years ago, right? And so I just appreciate you all for being here, because that means that y'all have sustained your hope, even when it has been very difficult. In the past 3 years, you know, there's a lot of loss and grief that has taken place, but there's also a lot of victories and love that we also need to celebrate. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Daryl and Barbara, for your leadership. And also to the other young people on this panel and who are watching, and others for paving the road for us.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. The next panelist I want to introduce and will introduce is one of our Transformers Justice Coalition Fellows. Our TJC Fellows is a program that we didn't know existed until we were in Georgia on the ground doing work, and they were just working up a storm. They were doing a command center. They were doing sine wave. They were in the community. They were helping seniors that needed because of the legislation that was passed, seniors that needed rides to the polls. These TJC fellows were involved in every facet of the electoral process in the state of Georgia during the runoff election. And I want to introduce first one of the TJC fellows who is a pre-law student over at Miami University in Ohio. And I believe she's out of Chicago, Illinois, if I remember correctly. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome sophomore Molly Duffy. Hi, Molly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I am so excited to be here. Hearing everybody talk about what they've been doing the last 2 years and where they were on January 6th just made me think that I was literally in my basement during my senior year doing it online. I was on a Zoom call for one of my classes, and I have vivid memories, my family and I just sitting in the living room in between like our passing period, just like watching the news just every single day. I had like a little news screen pull up next to my Zoom, and it was just such like a different time in our lives. And I think being here today like makes me realize how much I've changed and how much things have changed since then. I think that going from like being on Zoom as a student to like now being in the midst of the work is just absolutely incredible. And I'm so glad that I'm here tonight to share a little bit more about my perspective as a Gen Z and the work that I've been doing in Ohio with my school to help voters stay engaged and be registered to vote. That's what I do on my campus. So I'm really passionate about the work that I do. And I just want to thank everyone for being here today, and for Daryl and Barbara for hosting this wonderful event. I'm so glad to be here.
And welcome aboard. We're glad to have you. Also want to welcome from that same Gen Z class, that same Millennial Votes Matter Gen Z class and training, a TJC fellow who was in Washington, D.C. being trained, and then went down to Atlanta, Georgia, and all different parts of Georgia during the Georgia runoff election. Georgia was no new place for him because he's a junior at Morehouse University. Please welcome Malaj Robinson. Malaj.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone for being here, everyone that's watching all over the country. Again, my name is Malaj Robinson. I'm a political science major at Morehouse College. To be 100% transparent, my freshman year at college, I was not an advocate of voting. I was one of those type of persons that's like, what are we voting for? You know, or like this vote, my vote doesn't matter. I was an extreme advocate for that, right? However, moving forward, being a part of TJC and the training of voter suppressions and stuff like that, it helped me grasp a better understanding about voter suppression, and not more so just why voting matter, but what we voting for, right? Like what is at stake. So I just want to really give my commitments and thanks to TJC, the Transforming Justice Coalition, for educating me on the importance of voting and helping me get on the ground in Georgia, all over. We went to about 10 different cities and counties in Georgia. We went to meet, my Arbery family, And we also got to understand the history of, you know, our past and the things that we were fighting for and what we're still fighting for today. So I definitely want to say thank you for that. And also, I definitely wanted to say, after reading and educating myself on January 6th, they say that they was fighting for America, or the Fight for America rally. But in my eyes, I look at it like, I call it the fight for authority. They trying to have so much authority over the election, like Attorney Barbara Arwan said. They just it's crazy. It's crazy. Words can't explain how, you know, how corrupt that movement was. And again, I'd just like to say thank you for everyone. And I'm excited for this discussion.
All right, thanks so much, Malaj. So I want to open it up a little bit here, and I'm going to start with Kristen. I'm just ask everyone, if you want to jump in, you know, feel free to jump in on the discussion. You know, Kristen, one of the things that we heard Congressman Sarbanes say and underscore, that the whole January 6th insurrection was about voting rights, and it was about trying to suppress the will of the American people. And part of what that will of the American people, you know, certainly was kicking around, certainly would involve reproductive rights and the whole Dobbs decision, and you know, votes that are being now, you know, since it's going to the states, votes that are being taken on that. What do you make of all of this that's going on with regards to the reproductive rights and as it relates to the voting rights of Americans?
Thank you for that question, because I think it's such an important question. I think when we really look at what we're seeing that's happening in our country, it's really truthfully kind of what Barbara said earlier, is it's like we're at this place where people are struggling to we're trying to save our democracy, but we really are trying to save a democracy that's never been perfect. And we have people who are trying to hold on to the power of what the original Constitution was written for, that gave them full power. And now that they were seeing, and I think now we're having this place where everyone is fighting for their full authority and their full wholeness, because that's what we're seeing with women and persons of color. They're fighting for their full wholeness. There's backlash. There is an assault on that. And they don't benefit from giving everyone freedom. They don't benefit from allowing women to be fully whole and included in the Constitution. So oppression is the name of the game. And that's what we're seeing in every sense of the way. It aligns with voting rights, because it's all about our constitutional rights, you know, our rights to make our choices, our right for personal autonomy, for our bodily autonomy, our rights to make decisions that we govern, our privacy. All these things are all aligned. Constitutional rights are aligned in everything. You know, there is this quote from James Baldwin, and I know I'm talking about reproductive rights, but I think it fits in perfectly, where, you know, he said that he was not born, you know, his parents were not born a free man, or he was born as a slave, but he was also not, I'm paraphrasing, but he was also not born to have the hope of the slave master, right? And when we think about this, I want us to really think about what we're seeing right now as we see these attacks on all of our constitutional rights. Women have been fighting forever just to be included in the Constitution. And the way that Dobbs was overturned was because we are not included in the Constitution. Sex under the law is not included in the Constitution to protect women. So we still not considered whole enough to make our decisions about our bodies. Now, we can run your campaigns, we can run your office, we can do every type of job in the world, but when it comes to us making decisions about our bodies, then all of a sudden we become incapable of making those personal autonomy decisions. But it really wasn't about that. It's about power, and it's about control. Because if I can control this, if I can oppress them enough to a point where, if you know they have no other options, then I maintain control, and I maintain my greed, and maintain my power, and maintain my dominance. And that's really what we're seeing is happening. And so when we talk about Dobbs, we have to look at it not just about abortion access, but about oppression and how we continue to oppress a group that's already been oppressed for so long. and to continue to press them to the point where we are just limiting their constitutional rights where they have no other option. Even if that means we incarcerate them through some of these now vigilante laws and homicide charges for feticide, to where we continue to press them even further. So I just want to put this out in context that we have to look at Dobbs' decision bigger than just abortion and reproductive rights access. This is truly an assault on women's lives in general, but also a true constitutional attack that we are seeing and this is going on.
Right. And you know, you're on mute, Barbara.
And Daryl, can I just say to that really powerful statement made by Kristen, that's why we need the Equal Rights Amendment.
Absolutely.
Also. Absolutely.
And you know, one of the interesting things, Representative Reynolds or Senator Reynolds, from what Christian was saying and about the Dobbs decision, is what we see is the federal government, at least the conservatives in the federal government, pushing things out to the states. So and so the question becomes, the state of Texas, for instance. What do you do now to protect voting rights in Texas? Are they putting it in your hands? Isn't that just seems the feel of what's happening here? Is they want to take it away from a one rule, right? The federal legislation would make it uniform across the nation, but they don't want to do that. They're trying to push it down to the state levels. What is the response from the state level, Senator?
Well, that's a great question, and we see what's happening. It's back before the civil rights era, the slave states believed in states' rights because they didn't want the federal government interfering with their ability to discriminate and have slaves. They didn't want the federal government interfering with their right to have Jim Crow laws so that they can continue to disenfranchise Black people. They wanted to continue with how many bubbles in the bar of soap. They wanted to continue with poll taxes and literacy tests. So this is a continuation of that. When you have the federal government, basically the Supreme Court saying, hey, we want to allow the states to be able to, in essence, implement what Texas did, Jim Crow 2.0 with Senate Bill 1, to allow the hands of time to be turned back, just like they did in the Dobbs decision. We've evolved. We've come so far in this country because of struggles and sacrifices and people that risk their lives to fight for the freedoms and liberties that we enjoy today. The freedom to vote, the freedom of Blacks and Browns to congregate in mixed areas, not having to go to the back of the bus, women being able to vote. And right now we see many of those freedoms and liberties at stake. Don't think that we can't continue to evaporate and roll back many of the protections if the Supreme Court continues to take action the way they've done. And so the point I'm making is states like Texas that have Republican leadership that is philosophically tied with the MAGA movement, then that is what you'll get. We were the first to have the 6-week abortion ban. And we were one of the first states to have that. We were one of the first states, just like Florida, to implement these draconian laws that made it more difficult to vote. Right now in Texas, it's easier to purchase a gun and it's harder to vote. We made it where you don't have to have a permit to purchase a gun. We made it where it's harder because of strict voter ID laws to vote. And so voting is the bedrock of our democracy. Voting is the foundation. That's what the bedrock that makes America, America. It separates us from other countries that are ruled by dictators. And so we have to be very careful. And that is why we have to stay engaged. And that is why we can never get comfortable or complacent or go asleep at the wheel or have an attitude that, well, my vote doesn't count. That is why elections matter. That is why elections have consequences. And that is why we have to continue to make sure that we fight to advance the cause of freedom and democracy. So states like Texas and other states, we have to protect them from ourselves. And that is why we are so disappointed that the United States Senate did not pass the John Lewis Freedom to Vote Act when they had a chance. That is why we have to make sure that people like Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema don't continue to do harm when we had a chance to do the right thing and protect voting. So goes voting, so goes everything else. Dobbs, you name it, criminal justice reform, immigration reform, climate change, everything is tied to voting.
And you raise an excellent point with everything being tied to voting, and that's the message that we wanted to be certain that people were receiving, was that when there was the attack on the Capitol, it was an attack on the vote. It was an attack on the interest of the American people. That's what the attack was. It was to stop it so that it would not go into place, so that they could put in place the will of the minority over the majority. And so Jocelyn, back in 2022, when you did the hunger strike, that was one of the tools that you were using on the federal level to try to force the passing of the Freedom to Vote Act at that point in time. What do you think we're going to be facing then in 2023? What actions do you now take it to the state level because we're giving up on the federal level, or are we not giving up on the federal level and we still want to do the state level? What type of action do you think we try to march forward on to get voting rights and be certain that the interests of the people is adhered to?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. I believe that in this moment, we need to play both defense and offense here at all levels. That is the local level, that is the state level, and also is the federal level. And locally, it also, with Unpack for young people, it also means your universities. Have your universities become the example of what a democracy should look like. And it's something that we are at Unpack are trying to do. And in terms of tactics, right, I think we need to be willing to be creative and be strategic with our tactics, right? Like, absolutely, we need to be contacting our decision makers through phones, emails, and social media. But we also want to go at the root of these issues, as other panelists have said, right? And engage in tactics that are really going to force allies, partners, and decision makers to have to confront the realities of what is going on with our democracy, right? I mean, let's think about what the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, did many years ago with the lunch counter sit-ins, right? That was a tactic, a very creative tactic that they utilized to force the country to confront the realities of what racial discrimination was happening, right? And so I encourage us to target democracy reform at all levels and be willing to be creative and strategic with the tactics that we're doing. And people will follow. People are just wanting to lead and follow a democracy that truly represents them.
And that's going to be really interesting to talk about a democracy that truly represents them, because, Molly and Malaj, with you guys, you've come through something that nobody else, except for maybe Jocelyn, has come through on this panel. And that's this. You've come through an era where you had to go through pandemic learning. Where you couldn't, have school like we had school. You had to do it from home and do it virtually. You came through an era dealing with all the George Floyd uprising and the police accountability act, or lack of accountability acts that were there. You came through an era that dealt with the Parkside shooting, where you had to be concerned about handguns in schools and being safe where you went to high school, and as well as in college, and with regards to the HBCUs and the false alarms that were going on at HBCUs. And you've also come through an era where you've seen student loan debt forgiveness being fought for by the Gen Zs and being blocked by the Supreme Court. Now you're at the point here today where we have your first Gen Z in Congress that has been elected out of the state of Florida with Maxwell Frost being denied his seat because they can't swear him in because they can't get a Speaker of the House. I've got to ask you guys, with all of that going on, how does this make you feel, and what do you think should be done?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this all day, and I just really want to bring it back to a quote that Ron DeSantis said when he said that he didn't want Congressman Frost. No, he said, no one wants to hear from you. And by saying that to him, he's basically saying that he doesn't want to hear the opinions of Gen Z, which makes up about 21% of all Americans. Like, we are a substantial force in the United States. And by telling him that we don't want to hear from our congressman, that's just shutting off our entire voice at the federal level for policymaking. So when considering that, I think it's just important to note that, like, it sucks. Like we want our voices to be heard. And right now with the issue of not selecting the majority leader for the House, the bills, like the rules, like they're able to establish the rules for the House as well, which is preventing payroll for Congressman Frost, who's actually living on someone's couch right now while he's working in DC. So we need to prioritize making sure that a majority leader gets elected for the House. That way our congressmen can get paid and women can get paid. So I think it's important that we do everything that we can to make sure that happens. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Malaj, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, just to reiterate and piggyback with what Molly said, that definitely is a huge point. Just the fact that Maxwell is a representation of the Gen Z, and they is trying to denounce him and discredit him is absurd to me. And like Molly said, she pulled up a huge statistic of Gen Zers being 1/3 of the country right now. So I believe that Gen Zers should be 1/3 of the government and legislation, because we will have that representation. And I do talk to a lot of my peers and stuff like that about voting, and they feel as though we don't have that diversity in the government. And him not getting sworn in because of all these other difficulties and the hurdles that he's going through just shows the fight for our democracy.
And that's very interesting. And Jocelyn, did you want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I think that everything that you mentioned, Daryl, to paint the picture of what young people have been going through, I think just also really speaks to the hope that they have, right? That the fact that multiple crises are taking place, right? That they still show up. Young people saved our democracy in these recent elections. They showed up in the largest numbers that they have in the past 3 decades, right? And so it's very telling that right now, one of the most important things that we can do is to support a young person, right? Is to empower them, give them the tools so that we can be our agents of change. And we're showing up, right? And I think that, voting is an important step. It is something and a right that has been protected and fought for, like other panelists here have said. It is also a stepping stone, right? Like the work does not finish after Election Day, and we have to consistently show up. And young people are a prime example who have historically always been at the forefront of change.
And you raise a really good point with regards to showing up on Election Day. And Commissioner Sabir, I've got to ask you this question, because one of the things that we understand that's happening is that there's been direct challenges to many of our election workers that are there. And certainly, it's concerning to know that there are threats that are being made to poll workers, threats of their lives. And we're in it, and we're still in really the throes of a pandemic with regards to the disease that's there, and we're trying to get people to work the polls. If we don't have sufficient number of people to work the polls, how do we secure elections? What's going on, Commissioner?
Yeah, man, it's definitely a large threat that we were seeing, but we're also seeing unprecedented policy changes. Like we've seen the Department of Justice actually go across the country to actually monitor elections across the country. So there's a great chance that if there are threats or like acts of violence amongst poll workers, there's a more faster chance of that person being apprehended and being prosecuted and being held to the highest standard of law. And there's also unprecedented coordination with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So they're monitoring like texts and things like that, and surveillance is pretty high around elections. The people that threatened my life, they were apprehended by the time they got to Philadelphia. And that was in 2020. So we're in 2023 now, and we're actually seeing it be more safe for people that do want to serve. But again, that goes to the temperament where people are trying to intimidate people from being a part of elections. But we have seen the number of threats be lower now than what they were in 2020. And we're starting to see, just for a fundamental standpoint, that's why it's so important, that we talk about our experiences. If you were a poll worker and you didn't have any problems when you setting up your polling location, speak about it. Use those platforms to talk to your family and friends about how important it is to, number one, to become poll workers. And also, when you're talking about changing the different policies about how we protect our poll workers, because it's pretty safe to be poll workers. We know there are lots of threats, but there haven't really been actual acts of violence to them. So administrators from my level, they get most of the threats. The actual poll workers, the day-to-day people, most of them are pretty much safe and secure. But again, it's a long task and hard task for to keep everyone safe. But again, I definitely like to thank our federal partners, our local partners for keeping everyone safe.
And Barbara,
Yes, go ahead,
sure.
Darren.
I was going to ask you a question. And
Yes.
Barbara, don't you think that there is, and as well as Representative Reynolds, don't you think that there is a link, a line that runs from January 6th's insurrection, that runs through the threats that were occurring to that sister and her mother, the election workers in Georgia, a line that runs to the threats at the drop boxes with people with guns that are watching people coming with their ballots. There's a line that just runs through all of these things that seems to interconnect. Am I wrong on that, Barbara? Am I wrong on that, Representative Reynolds?
It's called Trump. Come on. He has been, have you guys watched him this week? He has spent time after time, tweet after tweet, going after those sisters who are election workers in Georgia, berating them, chastising them, just all over the place. And this is somebody running for president, has announced that he's going to run for president, who is at the core of the insurrection. Then I think that, I know we got a question coming up on this, but I honestly think, Daryl, that the Senate has to step up. We don't have the House. They're going to be talking about Mickey Mouse and all kind of other nonsense. So they're going to be on my last nerve and all of our last nerves, trying to distract, distort, and do anything they can to just waste our money for the next couple of years. But the Senate has to do something. They should call those women in and again, shower them with some love and affirmation. They should, talk about how horrible this is for any governmental official or even former president to be engaging in such work. I think we got to be thinking like this, because we can't just allow people to walk on us, to just walk all over us, trot us in the ground. We have to have the courage, the determination to protect our own. And I think that, I expect the Senate to step up. They cannot sit back and just say, well, the House is crazy. They got to really go on it 100%. Am I wrong, Jocelyn? Shouldn't they be putting up, hearings on the Freedom to Vote Act immediately? Shouldn't they be having hearings on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act immediately? Come on now. It's not time for passive action. It's time for bold, courageous, in your face, get it done action.
Can I say something quickly? Because I just want
Sure.
to piggyback off what Barbara's saying.
Great.
A couple of things too is one thing they also found out about a lot of the insurrectionists were their amounts of violence against women, intimate partner violence, and misogyny, and toxic masculinity that was existing in their behavior. So I think, like, when you're talking about this line and this pipeline that's going across multiple different things, I think we see it in every different area and intersection of what we're fighting for in our rights. So we have to pay attention to, and also who's inciting it and who's behind it. And so we know that Trump has been a large part of inciting a lot of this, and they look to him for inspiration and, you know, to motivate them to act out. And we continue to see this even with the elected officials, you know, who are getting up and making a mockery out of our Congress. But I think the most important thing is it's about us holding our elected officials accountable and stepping up and saying, hey, you know, you were elected because we need you to do this job. And like Barbara's saying, although this House has not figured it out, you know, we need you, Senate, whatever was left off that's going to help the people. We need you to step up and go to work because we don't have time to waste. People are dying. People are struggling. People are at their places of just, you know, crises, especially with COVID still existing, and people are still dying for COVID, you know.
Amen.
And so we have to really look at how do we hold our elected officials accountable, making phone calls, doing office visits, whatever we have to do to remind them that we still can work while we figure out everything else. We don't have to be at a stand hall. We can still get some work done. And that is, I think, our responsibility as organizations, as well as citizens, as voters, you know, our family members, to put pressure on them to make sure that they're representing us for our best interests. So I just wanted to add that.
And Daryl, you know, when you know, as soon as I finished speaking, I wrote down the word misogynoir, because, you know, the anti-women part of it, but the anti-Black woman part of it. It's no accident he's going after Black women. No accident. And we gotta, you know, understand how that race, gender, you know, intersection is being exploited by this man. And his hatred, you know, how much he, you know, attacks Black women on purpose. And I think that we have to, you know, really understand that as part of our organizing, Jonah, you know, because, you know, Jonah, I think that one of the issues for us as activists is something that Kristen just talked about. What do we do about those 18 Republicans in Biden districts? I mean, what kind of pressure are we gonna put on them? Or do we just sit back and give people passes? I think, you know, that we have to use the political power that we have to make demands for, you know, voting rights, demands for reproductive rights, demands for climate change, demands for, you know, anti-poverty work. I think we just can't stop. But I didn't know, anyway.
And I'm sure that, you know, Jonah, what Barbara is making reference to is not simply that they're in Biden districts and that it's any type of partisan thing. The question is they're in districts that are ripe for voting rights issues, and that they can be pushed on those voting rights issues. And Jocelyn, I know you wanted to weigh in on, you know, what the U.S. Senate should be pushed on now. Do they get a pass, Jocelyn, because of the House of Representatives? Do we just give them a pass? What are we doing?
No, absolutely not. And it's funny, Barbara and I were chatting earlier this week, and this is the most powerful country in the world, right? We can do whatever we want. This is a question about political will, right? And that's why it's important that we play both offense and defense here. They can put up the freedom to vote for a vote if they wanted to, right? It should not take young people having to go on a hunger strike, putting their bodies on the line for 23 days and getting arrested twice in 1 week for them to do their job and protect our democracy, right?
Yes.
Our humanity. And so, you know, I would say that the role that we have is to have the confidence and the audacity to push these electeds to do that, right? And to amplify and support the allies that we do have in there and the electeds that are our champions, as ones that we saw earlier today.
And, you know, interestingly, you know, this is a multi-pronged attack. I'm not certain who it was. I think it was you, Jocelyn, that talked about the multi-level attack that this is. You know, Malaj, one of the things that's really interesting is we're talking about, you know, many of the older people that are you know, focused on making the attack. You work with a lot of the Gen Alphas. You know, you work with, you know, teaching them some literacy things and teaching them about government things. Are there actions that you think we should be taking with our even younger, those our Gen Alphas, those teenagers and below, are there things that we should be doing with them to prepare them for when they become 18 and are able to vote?
Yes, yes, I definitely think it's a lot more that we need to teach them. But to be honest, I really think we just need to break down the fundamentals of the government. Break down a little bit more about the different branches, the legislative, executive, judicial branch. Because when we think about at Gen Zers and Gen Alphas, when we think about the politics and political actions, we think about the presidential election, right? We don't actually think about the local and state elections that really, are really tangible to the people, because, these local and state offices are more accessible to the people. So that's one of the things that I have been committing myself, and I promised myself that I'm going to teach and spread that awareness on the importance of the local elections, and just break down a little bit more of the judicial and just even the school board. We don't know who our school board electors are and things in that nature. So just going a little bit more in depth into what our government foundation is.
Daryl, can I comment? Can I piggyback on that? I'm so amazed and just so proud of you for bringing it out, because a lot of time young people don't realize the significance. I get a lot of young people, you see the voter turnout high in presidential elections, and they get excited about, the every 4 years. But you're right, it's those local elections. As former Speaker Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local. And most people don't even think about the school board elections, the city council elections. But those are the elections where you can put your hands, and the government is closest to the people, where you can make the most impact in your local communities. When you talk about ordinances, when you talk about mayors and city councils, those are the ones that appoint the police chiefs. So if you want to make sure that you have a police department that reflects the will and the values of the community, then you need to make sure that city council and mayor does that. Local elections, most district attorneys and most jurisdictions are elected. And so they're the ones that take cases to the grand jury. So if we want police to be held accountable, then we need to have district attorneys that making sure that they enforce the law equally, and that they don't continue to perpetuate disparities within our criminal justice system. So you said it, young man, and I'm proud to hear you. So we need to make sure more young people. But when I think about young people, we have a strong history. Daryl, you think about those freedom riders. You think about James Farmer. You think about John Lewis. It wasn't the older John Lewis. It was a young John Lewis. It was the young people that were those freedom riders that were risking their lives in those lunch counters. It was young people, Huey Newton, and even a younger Dr. King. So young people have a role in a stake in our democracy. And I'm so proud of these young people that are here today. And it's up to you and all of us to encourage other young people that you're never too young to get engaged. You're never too young to be involved, and you're never too young to make a difference. And so I just wanted to commend all these young people. I'm inspired. I'm encouraged. I know our future is in good hands with the leadership that we have. And too often as older people, we discount the youth. We need to give and share our knowledge and wisdom. And we need to make sure that we're encouraging and mentoring and embracing. And far too often, we as elected officials, I see it, they're discouraging them instead of encouraging them. We need to bring them in the tent and not see them as a threat, but see them as an asset and an ally.
And that's a great point that you raised there, Representative Reynolds. And, I know that both Molly and Malaj, and definitely Barbara, have often heard me say, you don't have to extinguish your light, for the people that are in elected office. No one's trying to take your torch from you, but light their torch and let them run their race from where they are. Light their torch and run together, run as fast as you can. And Molly, to that point, you've had some experiences now, that are just, I don't know if you've ever had them before, but you've worked at a command center during an election, and you were able to deal with some of the issues that were happening nationally. Can you share, I know you were in Wisconsin, I know you were in Georgia doing a command center. Can you share with folks why they should get involved in command centers and what you learned and how it changed you?
Absolutely. So As Ron and Malaj were sharing a little bit about like getting involved at an early age, I was thinking about my first ever experience with elections is when I turned right when I turned 18, and I was a poll worker at a local election in my area, and I totally forgot to vote that day. Like during my first election, I was eligible to vote because I was a poll worker. I didn't realize you had to like request an absentee ballot before because I was so young, but going back to the command center, like my first experience as a poll worker inspired me to get involved with voting rights. I think being a part of a command center is one of the coolest things I've ever done personally. I remember in Milwaukee, we got up at like 5. I think I got up at 4:30 that morning. I did not go to bed until 10 p.m. I mean, I'm definitely a morning person, but 4:30 is just not my cup of tea. But we had the best time ever in Milwaukee. We were in one room all day. I think one of the coolest things that you don't realize that I didn't realize going into this experience was we were on social media all day exploring and figuring out the trends and what was going on across the country. So we would find specific Twitter hashtags, we would look up very specific stories, and then based on these things that we found, we were able to contact people, real life people, and just hear about their experiences by aiding them in the best way that we could. I think the most memorable experience for me in Milwaukee, at least, was when we received a call about voter affirmation statements, otherwise known as a form of literacy tests, coming out of Minnesota. And that was one of the craziest things I've ever heard, because I thought those have been long gone. But apparently they still exist in 2022. And it was just insane to like hear the story about why that was happening. It was targeting Latinx voters who they thought weren't able to like read this statement in English, even though you're not required to like be able to read a statement to vote. That shouldn't be a thing. So that was very interesting hearing about that experience, and then learning about how to properly tackle that as well. So we luckily had Attorney Arwine and Attorney Jones there with us, who were able to kind of guide us through the process about how do we contact the right people to figure out how this works. So being behind the scenes there, we're kind of able to figure out how to go through the chain of command of government and how to like deal with the issue at one-on-one with the person who was on the phone. So I think that was both in Georgia and in Milwaukee. I had such a great time learning about the process, and that experience really solidified my interest in going into law too, and really learning about how the chain of command of government and learning about how to properly and legally deal with these issues that are going on. So that was such a great experience. I'm really grateful that I got to be there.
And so, Jocelyn, I see the steam coming off of you when you're hearing about this literacy test and the Latin community there in Minnesota. Do you want to comment on what you've just heard?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of steam for sure. And it's funny, my dad just got home and he's sitting right across from me. And I just think about just the multiple ways that so many of these institutions and so many of these people who are just afraid of Black and brown people having the right to vote, the lengths that they will go to take that right away from us, right? And I mean, my father, he never went to school. Like, I've been translating documents for him since I was 7 years old and able to start reading. And I'm just thinking about him having to do a literacy test, even though he is a citizen in this country, right? And voted for the first time in the recent elections, fortunately. And I'm just fuming because it's ridiculous. And I think a part of it's because, as I believe Representative Reynolds mentioned earlier, us being able to vote, Black and brown people being able to vote, is an actual threat to a lot of these institutions and also white supremacy. And that is why they consistently go out of their way to disenfranchise us.
And go ahead, Barbara. You're on mute.
The other part of this is that, of course, we stopped it. The beauty of the command centers is that when we find out about these problems, instead of just, retweeting, instead of just talking about, oh, how sad, or just making a report, we actually contacted people and we followed through, and we got to those elected officials and said, what are you doing? What you're doing is illegal. We're going to sue you. We got right on top of them. And I think that, these are the realities. But what I really love, Molly, is how many people just told us, thank you. just thank you. They were so glad somebody cared enough to fight for their voting right. And, it wasn't that one person complained about what was going on in on the outskirts of Minneapolis. It turned out that there were thousands of people who were affected by that. And, and so it's just so important that we're there on the scene. Daryl, the other thing I wanted to talk about, because we were talking about the Freedom to Vote Act, let's talk about those 18 million people and those 6 million people. Let's talk about the tragedy of felon disenfranchisement and the need for voter restoration in the United States. Let's talk about that, about how wrong it is that, that we have, 18 million people in this country who are eligible to vote, but are confused and don't vote because they don't want to go to jail. They don't want to illegally vote. And the states are doing nothing to help them to know what their rights are. In fact, where people make the mistake, they over publicize like they did in, as you know too well, Representative Reynolds, as they did, with Miss Mason, right? And, and all of this, evil that they've done, to discourage people who were formerly incarcerated, when we know that people who are incarcerated are overwhelmingly people of color. And we know about the inequities in our so-called criminal justice system. And, and it's just really, to me, that's something we got to keep on top of, that this is, one of our most important reforms. I was happy to see that Governor Walz, when he's talking to all these other states about passing affirmative, strong, positive voting rights legislation, that he has that issue at the top, not to mention the 6 million people who are banned in Florida, Iowa, the various stupid states, Arizona, that have these horrific, really bad laws. But also there's a problem with these states that tell people you got to be off probation, off papers, got to pay all these fines, fees. All this is nonsense. And we need to remove every single one of those barriers. And I just had to put that out there, Daryl, because I know there's a whole lot of people listening in that situation.
Right. You're absolutely right, Barbara, because the 18 million, formerly convicted folks that have felonies on their records that are eligible to vote, but because they've always heard that felons can't vote, they don't think they can vote. And both, I think Molly and Malaj were with us in Georgia when we came across one of those people that, that could vote and didn't know he could vote during the runoff election. And just the light bulb going off, because the second part of that equation, of course, was that because of the suppressive Senate Bill 202 down in Georgia, that said that because of the shortness of the period, that the person that didn't know he was eligible but would be eligible, he still couldn't register because they didn't give enough time for him to be able to register to vote. So he was excluded, wouldn't allow it. So he was precluded from being able to exercise that right to vote. But Representative Reynolds, I've got to ask you, because I can continue to say it, and I'll say it and say it again. It's going to be a states' rights game, at least for the next 2 years. In the state of Texas, with that Senate Bill 1 that y'all had, where you stopped the cars from being able to come in and being able to vote. What's up with that? How do we respond to that? Can we respond to that?
Well, Daryl, unfortunately, until the Congress enacts federal voting rights legislation, we're going to have states that do what Texas did. We see it in Texas and Georgia and Florida and other states that are led by Republican governors. And so there's limited things that we can do, but we can certainly continue to mobilize. We can certainly continue to elect and vote for people that care about the freedom to vote and protecting democracy, and voting for state representatives and state senators and lieutenant governors that share those same shared values. So we can never be so jaded that we just give up. We have to have that David versus Goliath attitude that, just with the faith of a mustard seed, that we can move mountains and that we can defeat giants. So yes, it is an uphill battle. but that just means that our resolve has to be stronger, and we have to mobilize more to get more people registered to vote, to knock on more doors, to make more phone calls. Because as long as the Supreme Court is leaving it in the state's hands, then we have to make sure that we change the trajectory of those states, including Texas, including Georgia, and all the other states in Florida. And so even though we were disappointed with the outcome of what just transpired in November in Texas, certainly I was disappointed in what happened in Florida. We cannot throw in the towel. We have to double down our efforts and make sure that we continue to fight for democracy. And we won't win every fight, but that doesn't mean we'll quit. That doesn't mean we're going to throw in the towel. That means that we need to strategize and be more strategic and more determined to succeed. So yes, we have to continue to also put pressure on Congress to do the right thing, because we cannot continue to leave it to the states. If we did, we wouldn't have many of the gains that we have today if it was up to the states. So yes, the federal government bears the ultimate responsibility, and that is why we do need to make sure that we continue to press the Senate to pass federal voting rights legislation. Even though they may say, well, it won't pass in the House. Doesn't matter. They need to continue to press forward. Failure is not an option. We cannot be complacent. We cannot be content, and we cannot be defeated. So I say that it's all of the above. It's not either or. It's not A and B. It's A, B, all the way through Z. Whatever, we have to continue to fight. It took a long time for us to get the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It wasn't overnight. Imagine if some people would say, well, it's too difficult. We've lost some people during the Freedom Rides. We might as well just give it up. No, they continue to press forward in spite of the dangers, in spite of the uncertainty, in spite of people being lynched and hung or trying to exercise their rights. I'm like Fannie Lou Hamer. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sit on my behind. That means that I'm going to continue to work and do everything I can while I have a chance to make it better for the next generation. So yes, what do? We continue to make good trouble. We continue to work, organize, mobilize, and then put pressure on the federal government to do what they need to do, so that ultimately that we get federal voting rights legislation passed. We reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. We do everything we can to strengthen voter protections and protect our democracy.
Thanks so much for those remarks. And, we talked about this link that runs through all of this. And January 6th, don't look at it as a thing in and of itself. It is interconnected to everything that we've just been discussing with regards to voting rights. So, Jonah, your closing remarks. What should we be doing at this point in time? What is Public Citizen going to be doing to be certain that that folks are addressing these issues? Your closing remarks, Jonah, and then we'll go to Barb.
Thanks, Daryl. And Representative Reynolds, I think your words were so inspiring about us needing to act and us needing to persist and keep the march going. And I think, now's that moment. We have there are two sides of history right now. There is the side of this chaos, this destruction, this white supremacist, nihilist force that we're seeing in the House play out this week. And then there's the side of justice, this multiracial, multi-generational democracy where we can really work for our freedoms, where we can really work for equality, where we can make sure that people have housing, that they have health care, that they have education, that we have our freedoms for our reproductive rights. That's the struggle right now. It's whether we have a nation that works for us, for all of us, or works for a very small few who just want more power. We need to be building movement right now. We need to be building movement in the streets. We need to be building movement in the ballot boxes. And we showed this past November that a movement for democracy can win, that the voice of democracy can win. And we need to keep building that movement and that mobilization.
Amen.
And that's how we're going to win on a federal level. And over the next year, we can win many, many states. We can win these reforms and we can build power. In states like Michigan and Minnesota, we can win significant democracy reforms, but in many other places on a local level, we can pass democracy reforms and we can build our power. Like Milaj talked about, we can educate ourselves and make sure we're active in local politics. And it's that movement that's going to carry us through and make our struggle victorious, and really is an incredible point in history where we're choosing between two forces. And it's up to us to make sure that the force of justice wins.
Thank you, Jonah. And I did want to recognize, as we're moving to Barbara's closing, that one of our biggest fighters for voting rights was on the call with us, and I think that he's still there. He's the father of Ahmaud Arbery. He's Marcus Arbery, and he took time out of Brunswick to be certain that he was here to participate. He's always on the forefront with us. Whenever we call on him, Marcus Arbery shows up. He's one of those people that if he gives you his word, you can take it to the bank because he's good on it. And when we went down to Brunswick, to Stelliton Shores with our Gen Zs, he was there. He was certain to say hello to everyone that was there, to speak to them, to meet with the young folks that were there, and to be certain that he would let them know that he was proud of them and the steps that they were taking in terms of voting. So I did want to give Marcus the opportunity to say hello to everybody, and then Barbara will go to you for your closing. Marcus, hello.
Hey, Darryl, you hear me?
I can hear you good.
Yes.
Man, good to see you. Good to see you and Miss Barbara, always. Y'all already know when y'all call me, I'm coming. Because I just thank God for y'all, the stuff y'all do for the people. I wish we had 1 million more people like y'all too. This world will be doing a lot of changes, but we got to keep on fighting and keep on getting our people equal justice. Vote. Got to get out and vote to get the wrong one out of there. Love y'all. Let's keep it going.
We love you back. We see you back there, Kim. We see you back there.
And we see Gary.
You don't see Gary back here, do you?
Oh, we see Gary.
All right.
Everybody. We're so happy to see you. And we want the world to know right now that we are still out for 100% justice for Ahmaud. And yes, we'll be back in Brunswick because Jackie Johnson has to be held accountable. And so thank you for being some of the most amazing voting rights advocates. We know that the vote went up in Camden County after we did our crusade there. We know that, that you've done all this amazing, voter registration and voter advocacy, and that you've taken, this tragic loss and made it into a powerful force. We will always love you. And 2023 is our year. Always.
All right.
Love you, our very family.
Love you to God. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Proud Creek. God.
And we'll see y'all soon. We'll definitely see y'all soon down in Brunswick.
Very soon.
Very soon.
All right.
Barbara, do you want to give your closing remarks?
Yes. I just want to say to all the panelists, thank you. We know this was hard. It's a Friday night. We want to say to everybody watching, all the watch parties, all the individuals, everybody who's at home with family, everybody who's just watching by themselves, thank you for tuning in. Be aware this isn't the end. If you're still hungry and you're going, oh, I want to go more into that subject, I wish they had done more on that one, we are not finished. We will have more of these TELE-TOWN halls. We usually do at least once a week. Once a month. I'm sorry, Darryl, I didn't mean to scare you. We do one at least once a month, and we pull out very specific subjects about voting rights. We are going to be bringing up our Good Vote, our Good Trouble Voting Rights Institute, headed up by the wonderful Lynn Whitfield. And I want to give her a shout out and her and Breland Tilford for handling all of these technical logistics. Just notice how smooth they gone. I want to also thank Yolanda Coley, who has been just magnificent in making all of this happen. So our thanks to every one of the leaders of every watch party. We want to make sure that we follow up on these recommendations. So look for us. Our next public event will be another TELE-TOWN Hall in February. But look for us in March. Early March, we'll be in Selma. We're going to run at least 2 to 3 workshops. We're going to be talking not only about our Gen Z and Millennial Votes Matters mobilizations, but we're going to be talking about these issues of fighting felon disenfranchisement, doing everything we can to restore. Can you imagine if 23 million people who are now excluded from the franchise to vote? Do you understand the power? There's 51 million unregistered Americans. Half of them, almost half of them fall into this category. We got work to do, and we can do it. We can win this battle. We should never feel that we're pipe dreaming. We can win this. We just got to organize. We got to be persistent, and we got to be creative and innovative, and we got to fight. I also want to make sure that we're not leaving here without people understanding that the attack on our democracy is not over. January 6th was not the end of the attack. It was just one step along the way. Every day we see something where our democracy is under attack. It is our duty, our right, our time. It is for us to stand up and fight in this moment to make sure that we not only protect American democracy, but we make it better, that we expand it, that we make it more representative. I just want to mention real quickly, you guys, everybody's talking about, Maxwell Alejandro Frost, that he's a first Gen Zer. Listen, you guys, there ought to be 60 of them. 60 people in his age group should be sitting in the Congress right this minute. So we got work to do, big time work to do. And I don't want anybody to think that we sit on our laurels. And so we're all about Good Trouble 2023. We're going to be out there doing it. And young voters always will be leading the way. And we have work to do all across the country. You see that painting behind me? That's the Herero women of Namibia and South Africa. And they were Germans when they tried to take over their territories, committed humongous, ugly genocide against those people. But guess what? They fought and they won. They have their own countries. They have their own governments. They have their own rights, and they're represented. So let's, remember that struggle is never easy. That struggle is hard, but you know what makes struggle good? What I love about it, it's not just winning, because I love to win. But I also love all the beautiful people. And so many of the beautiful people have been on these panels today. Kristen, Molly, Ron, Milad, Jonah, Jocelyn, Omar was on earlier. I know Senator Hughes tried to get on. And having John Sarbanes and the mighty co-leader, Daryl Jones. I mean, it's the beautiful people you work with, right? That's what makes this so good, that when we unite together and we get it done. So everyone, this is just the beginning. Be sure to, join us. If you're not following TJC, Transformative Justice Coalition, you should. tjcoalition.org. If you're not following Public Citizen, you should. You should be part of it. We all support the Declaration for American Democracy, DFAD. We are all part of an overall progressive movement. We are the change that this country needs. It will happen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you so much, Barbara. And we encourage everyone to get involved, get off of the sidewalk, get into the streets, get to the drop box, get to the voting booth, get your vote on when the time is there and encourage somebody to go along with you. Let me tell you, it doesn't stop here. It doesn't stop here. We need you to listen to us on Igniting Change Radio every Tuesday at noon Eastern Standard Time. You can join us at WOLDCnews.com or BarbaraArnwine.com. Every Tuesday, Igniting Change, we're going to be bringing those issues. You will be bringing people like you've heard come today, just bringing it straight talk, 100%, as they say, keeping it 100. That's what we do. So we ask that you follow us on our Twitter page at TJC_DC. You can follow us on our Facebook page. You can reach us on tjcoalition.org. But whatever you do, get involved. As Perrin Mitchell used to tell me, former Congressman Perrin Mitchell used to tell me, if you see a good fight, get in it. Folks, get in the fight. And let's make it happen. Thank you, everyone. Thank to all of our panelists. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Malaj. Thank you, Jonah. Thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you, Christian Nunez. Thank you, my frat brother, Ron Reynolds. Thank you, Omar Sabir. Thank all of y'all for everything that you've done.
Thanks, Marcus, and all the Arbery family. Thank you.
And the entire Arbery family. Amen.
And folks, one thing you heard, we're not just talking heads. You're going to see us on the ground doing the work. Because we believe in doing the work that makes us win. Thank you.
See you soon, everyone. Take care. Peace.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.